Thank you for tuning in today. I'm Tyler Choice. I have a background in hacking and reverse engineering, and in this video I'd like to take some time deconstructing Ivan Karamazov's character in The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I've been wanting to make content on Dostoevsky for a while. I know that it's a very dense text, and it's not very approachable and not very easy to get into. And some of the paragraphs are so long that it's very dense material. Dostoevsky doesn't always make it clear what he's trying to say, but I think when you kind of hack away at it and start breaking it down, you can kind of create a picture of some of the points and themes he goes over. And I think Ivan is a good place to start with the complexity of his character, and he's interesting, and for any intellectual, they have probably shared some of this. If they have had any religious background, they probably shared some of the same intellectual issues that Dostoevsky is struggling with. So I'd just like to take some time to explore the character here and just read some passages and look over Ivan. His father, who's not a good representative of Ivan, he might as well be the devil, gives us a good kind of intro to a negative view of Ivan, where he says, I don't recognize Ivan, I don't know him at all. Where does he come from? He's not one of us in soul. He says, Ivan is not one of us. People like Ivan are not our sort, my boy. They are like a cloud of dust. When the wind blows, the dust will be gone. So we have this distant character people don't really see. They might not know what he's thinking. He's secretive. He seems to be different. And there's quotes in this book that relates all of the Karamazovs as being sensualists. Ivan is a Karamazov, so he must also be a sensualist type. It just appears that he might be more intellect focused. So in chapter 34 is when Ivan starts to reveal some of his thoughts to Alyosha, his brother, his more innocent, more optimistic, high-spirited, faithful character. Maybe a more faithful aspect of Dostoevsky that has some childlike faith and wish to believe, whereas Ivan, his mind is so overworking that he can't rationalize all of the concepts that he's looked at, that the world has told him. And he starts off by telling Alyosha what he thinks of God, as someone had said, if there was no God, he would have to be invented. And man has actually invented God. And it's not strange that God should really exist. The marvel is that such an idea, the idea of the necessity of God, could enter such of the head of a savage, vicious beast as man. And Jordan Peterson, I believe, has talked about this quote, that Dostoevsky makes a point, and other people have made this point, that it is quite a miracle that we would live in a reality in which such a savage brute as man, and all of the things that he's done and his nature, would even come up with the idealistic concept of a God that's perfect and good, and all of these things that we don't see in human nature early on in history, at least in our concept of history. If you look far enough back in history, there are many people and cultures that appear to be very good and very happy by our standards. Then he goes on to talk about the others around him that might have some of these same kinds of thought experiments, the Russian boys and the Russian professors that are all just making hypotheses. They're probably not going as deep as Ivan is here. They're probably not getting anywhere. And so Ivan tries to tell Alyosha what his essential nature is. What manner of man is he? What does he believe in? And what does he hope for? That way, that's his attempt at being known. Like, maybe they don't have to agree, but maybe they can try to understand each other. And so he says, I tell you that I accept God simply. But if God exists and he created the world and he created it according to this Euclidean geometry and this human mind that can only perceive 3 dimensions, it's limited in what it can grasp. It can't. In a 3-dimensional world, your touch, taste, sound, smell, thought are limited to those senses. They're not really capable of perceiving more complex concepts than it's equipped. And Ivan knows this. And so he's mentioning the science-y people who doubt whether the whole universe or the whole of being was only created in this Euclid's geometry, this 2 parallel lines which can never meet on Earth may meet somewhere in infinity. I've come to the conclusion that since I can't even understand that, I can't expect to understand about God. And he says later on, I had this quote in my mind already, he said, I understand nothing. I don't want to understand anything now. I want to stick to the fact. I made up my mind long ago not to understand. If I try to understand anything, I shall be false to the fact. And I have determined to stick to the fact. And I advise you to never think about it either, my dear Alyosha, especially about God, whether he exists or not. All such questions are utterly inappropriate for a mind created with an idea of only 3 dimensions. So I accept God, and what's more, I accept his wisdom, his purpose, which are utterly beyond our people. I believe in the underlying order and the meaning of life. I believe in the eternal harmony in which they say we shall one day be blended. I believe in the word to which the universe is striving, which is the concept that the word reaches out, it comes out as life, and from that initial push, all things are unfolding, all things are in the same nature of that word, which is life. So it's all things in this universe would be striving for life. It's always trying to grow, it's always trying to procreate, which itself was with God, which itself is God, and so on to infinity. I seem to be on the right path, don't I? It's kind of making an argument there that he bases his understanding of God on logic, on what he can understand, and what he can understand is that you can know and perceive, if you just look, that this universe that we're in is striving for life. It is striving to reach out and grow. And you can take that and see that his model of this universe and God as he can understand God is that the world ends up at heaven. The world ends up, all of the promises of the Bible that God promises, they end up happening not because of just some prophecy, but because of that initial word and what it does, and that it strives for life, and that this eternal harmony in which we shall one day be blended. In other words, like, as time passes, we progress and develop, and we understand more, and we learn more, and eventually we figure out harmony because we start to learn from our mistakes. We start to learn that suffering is not a good thing, and start to try to figure out how to alleviate that suffering with the thing we call love. And this is where Ivan's rebellion starts to come into the picture. I use the word rebellion because that's the title Dostoevsky uses for some of these, the next chapter, this chapter. And Ivan rejects this universe because he can't rationalize it. And when you really look at this, you can see that it's because it would break his heart. He has too much love for humanity and too much understanding for humanity to essentially allow himself to be evil. And I'll explain that. He knows that he can't accept the world created by him because in this world he perceives evil. In this world he perceives that evil things happen, and because he has a normal mind which judges evil and judges atrocity and judges that things shouldn't be this way and there should be retribution for things, and we shouldn't be victims, we shouldn't suffer, and especially a child shouldn't be suffering. That all the humiliating absurdity of human contradictions will vanish like a pitiful mirage in the end. And so he might have this image that a lot of philosophical thought is like, well, when your vision's clear, there is no past, and none of the things you imagined really did ever happen. It was all kind of like a dream. It was all kind of like a mirage. So maybe that somehow makes it better for the rational mind. That all of this had to happen, but maybe it was just all kind of a mirage. All the contradictions go away. Like the despicable fabrication of the impotent and infinitely small Euclidean mind of man, that in the world's finale, at the moment of eternal harmony, something so precious will come to pass that it will suffice for all hearts, for the comforting of all resentments, for the atonement of all crimes to humanity, of all the blood they've shed, that it will make it not only possible to forgive, but to justify all that has happened with men. But thought all that may should come to pass, I don't accept it. And so here's this vision of this world that all of the suffering that ever happened and all of the understanding born of that gives birth to something greater. It gives birth to some kind of love that we could never comprehend. This gift of what Jesus would give us when he returns as the King of Kings. He would give us this precious gift that's so much more, something of God, something so much greater than we can imagine. That somehow is some miraculous force that can heal everything that happened, make it all resolved like it never happened. And he says, I won't accept it. Even if parallel lines do meet and I see it myself, I shall see it and say that they've met, but I still won't accept it. That's what's at the root of me, Alyosha. That's my creed. I am in earnest in what I say. If he wasn't in earnest about what he said, he would be a liar, a hypocrite. He would be saying one thing but believing another. He'd be trying to rationalize one God but not another. And as you get into Ivan's character, you'll find that he does do this. He does rationalize different aspects of reality differently, hypocritically, so that he can rationalize his existence. Says, you didn't want to hear about God, but only to know what the brother you love lives by, and so I've told you. Says, why did you begin as stupidly as you could? Asked Alyosha. For the sake of being Russian. Russian conversations on such subjects are always carried on inconceivably stupidly. And secondly, the stupider one is, the closer one is to reality. The stupider one is, the clearer one is. Stupidity is brief and artless, while intelligence wriggles and hides itself. Intelligence is a knave, but stupidity is honest and straightforward. I've led the conversation to my despair, and the more stupidity I have presented it, the better for me. It's almost saying, he's almost covering up the heresy in his thoughts and the total despair in his belief systems by presenting them a little more simply. And you have a little bit of the Tao in there, that simplicity is closer to intelligence. It's closer to the actual reality we live in. So he says, you will explain why you won't accept the world? To be sure I will, it's not a secret. I don't want to corrupt you or turn you from your stronghold. Perhaps I want to be healed by you. Ivan smiled suddenly quite like a gentle child. Alyosha had never seen such a smile on his face before. You have this childlike hope in Ivan, maybe a dreamlike, idyllic-like wish. Not a wish he actually believes in, but maybe a wish to be liberated from the pain of his own mind, liberated from the pain of being wrong, which is another way to say that his truth is currently despairing, and we as humans generally like meaning, and we generally relate meaning to truth, and when a person doesn't have a sense of truth, that makes reality somewhat meaningless, and man tends to need to have a reason for his existence. So the lack of faith on Ivan's part and the belief systems that point towards a hellscape reality on the larger scheme of things, because even if the world all gets better, the only problem is that Ivan is in the middle of it. Maybe if he was at the end of it, it wouldn't be so bad, but he's in the middle of it, the middle of the change in history, which means he's gonna disappear, and his life had no meaning, and there was no point for any of his suffering and any of his despair, and that's a large part of what he can't rationalize. So knowing that he doesn't understand the truth, knowing that it's impossible for him to understand the truth, knowing that it's impossible for him to have the kind of simplistic faith that Alyosha has, because his mind would never allow it. These are some thoughts that are pretty heavy, but I know that they're relatable to a lot of people that grew up in the church that had some of the kinds of questions that Ivan has here, and I think some of them, they shut off those questions and get older and stick by their faith because they don't really have another option. And some people, they say it's all of this can't be true, none of this can be true, and they just turn away from it and look away from it entirely. And it's interesting that, yeah. So in the next video, if I record another video here, I will continue looking at Ivan, and this leads into the Grand Inquisitor, which is Dostoevsky's big story. I think there's so much in it, there's so much value in it, that it's probably worth dissecting 100 times. There's a lot of meat packed into these words, so pretty cool to get into. If you like this video, thank you. Please like and subscribe if you'd like, and see you next time.